Welcome back, good people. The playoff results are in. We have a lot of discussion about the results, who's in, who's out. Let's take a look at the overall aspect of what's going on. Of course, there's always going to be pros and cons to changes. We have a change in the college football structure, and this is year one. So let's look at it from a positive perspective. Okay, you have 12 slots and you have more opportunity. Now, here's the thing. While we have this opportunity to have up to 12 programs in the playoffs, that's better than 4, because you have to understand, when it was only 4, there was an easy way to monopolize or to say, hey, we are the only teams that's going to be in these 4 to increase our chances of winning. And that is one of the reasons, actually part of the reasons, why Alabama won majority of the national championships, is because they were always getting in and they were monopolizing that 4. First it was 2 teams, and then it went to 4. So as you could clearly see, they conquered that system. Now, what are we seeing now? Okay, everything has changed. We are no longer in that time frame. We are no longer in that monopolizing dictatorship of greed in college football. Yes, you had your run, Alabama. Yes, you were able to, take advantage of what the opportunities presented. You were able to manipulate the system to be able to get those 7 national titles, because we know that if the strength of schedule mattered then, it definitely matters now. Because how are you able to continually, consistently win national titles? Well, it starts with opportunity. And clearly you guys were given the opportunity to do what you did. So now that the doors are open, other teams also must have the opportunity, because that's what this is about. The opportunity to prove yourself and to win. If you don't have that opportunity, how could you win? For an example, let's look at all of the programs that this year were fairly good. We're not even talking about them. Let's bring it down to the Big 12. There were 3 more other programs in the Big 12 that were good and would be good playoff contenders. They wasn't even discussed. They didn't even get the opportunity. If you look at the selection of all the members that were able to be seeded into the playoffs, most of these conferences have multiple teams. The Big 12 is the only program, with the exception of the group of 5, was the only conference that only were able to get 1 program in. And guess what? We know why, but at the same time, guess what? We must win. And that's going to happen moving forward. But we don't need the naysayers who have a greed mindset of saying, oh, we're not happy because our team didn't get in, so now we want to change the whole structure or the format of the playoffs. Let's look at it like this. It's a lot of things going on right here. For one, let's look at the SEC. You got 3 programs in. 3 programs in the playoffs. That gives you 3 opportunity, or 3 out of 12, which is a quarter of a chance to win a national title. Likewise, the Big 10, they also have a quarter of a chance to win. Actually, my bad. They have 1/3 of a chance to win the national title. So does the Big 12. And the other 1/3 chance of winning the national title goes to a mixture of conferences between, guess who? The Big 12 the ACC, and the group of 5, with two going to the ACC, one to the Big 12, one to the group of 5. Now, when we look at this, you still have people complaining, talking about the format is not correct, when clearly they got 1/3 of the opportunity to win a national title. So does the other conference. Okay, now let's dig a little deeper. Also, these same conferences who are complaining about the format of ranking, right? First, it was an individual complaint. Oh, why didn't your team get in? Oh, I know why, because you lost three games and they were in conference in this so-called strength of schedule that you say you have. And yes, we know that when you're playing schools that are considered to be good power teams, of course you're going to have a lesser chance of winning. Well, guess what? That's what you signed up for when you want to include all of these teams in your conference. Think about that. No one forced Texas to go to the SEC. No one forced Oklahoma to go to the SEC. No one forced Missouri to go to the SEC. No one forced Nebraska to go to the SEC, or where are they at? The SEC, the Big Ten. So these are examples, right, of explaining this is what you asked for and these are the results. You're making, I said this a year ago in the other videos, you're making it harder for yourself to win a title, period. That's what happens when you load your conference with a lot of teams that you consider to be good programs, period. Now, let me tell you another edge that is not being discussed about how the SEC only have 8 conference games. What does this mean, guys? Now, in comparison to the Big 12 having 9 conference games. Now, it do give you a little bit more money. That's a way to make a little bit more money, to have one more extra conference game. But let me tell you what it do in the long run. And this is why the Big 12 having this issue right now that we see with more losses, because they're producing 2 lost teams on a regular basis. It's rare that they'll get 1 lost team, and it's almost impossible to get an undefeated team. Now, let's look at the reality and the realistic of this, okay? When you're playing at this level, you're not going to have a team coming through the Big 12 pipeline or any of the Power 4 conference, especially the SEC, the Big 10. You're not going to have a team coming through the pipeline with undefeated. It's impossible to even expect that or ask of that, because the teams are too good in competition for this to happen. It's an unrealistic viewpoint that we're taking or putting pressure on these teams. That's what should have been discussed, really, of why teams should be considered more so than what they are now when they have losses, is because it's really impossible. You asking these programs and these kids and these students to be perfect, and they're not perfect. And there's no way that any program in college football is going to be undefeated. It's a rare occasion. And if a program is undefeated, you might want to look at that program, because it's too much competition out there for this to be an undefeated program. It's just almost impossible. Or it just means your conference is weak and everybody is not competitive to be undefeated. So let's not expect a 12-0 season from these programs, because that's rare occasions. And when that happens, it's very rare. Just expect that 1-2 losses is going to happen when you have big conferences with 16 and 18 members. It's just going to happen. There's no way. Now, let's look at how this affects the Big 12, or how it's against them. Because guess what? They play 1 more additional conference game. They're playing 9 conference games, while the SEC is only playing 8. Okay, so that means that's less cannibalism. The SEC has created a tweak in their system, in their scheduling, that allows them not to cannibalize their programs more so like the Big 12. That is the difference. And on top of that, they're able to get more wins outside of the conference, which they have been, which has been capitalizing on their schedule, right? And then they're able to factor in, okay, let's throw in Vandy and some other light teams, right? So we can get that in conference look and saying we have a powerful strength of schedule the way they got it. So basically that's what they're banking on. The SEC is banking on strength of schedule, but you got to understand that they only have 8 conference games. So they're not necessarily beating themselves up like the Big 12 is. So what should you do in this case? If you're the Big 12, do we go to 8 conference games and increase our abilities and save ourselves for the postseason like the SEC is doing? Because that's what they're doing. They're getting their play in mid-season, but towards the end of the season, they're saving themselves for the postseason. They're giving themselves more energy for that extra game or two in the postseason. That's how they're able to get to the postseason. The Big 12, not so much. They're cannibalizing themselves from within because they're playing that extra conference game, which generates a little bit more money to give them a little bit more money on the edge. But then you have to make that decision. Do we reduce to 8 conference games? Should there be a rule to where every conference have to play 8 games or 9 games? Because that's what's the difference between the 2 conferences. Should we cannibalize as we grow in members and good programs? Because you're going to destroy the postseason for one another. That's what's happening. You're playing that extra conference game and you're competing at high levels in that extra match, and somebody got to lose. And that's what's happening, and that's not being factored in for postseason. So Brett, your mark, you have a decision to make. Do we go to eight conference games and take the hit on money, that one game? Or do we stay that way? To increase your success in postseason, you have to consider using the method that the SEC is using, because they only have an 8 conference game and it's working for them. So that is something to note. Another thing, okay, as I mentioned, the SEC got more members in the playoffs than they ever had. So is the Big 10. There should be no complaints there. The Big 12 should really be speaking, but we needed to make this establishment on how the champions should get that bye week. That was the main concern. But for the most part, there should have been another consideration of a Big 12 member, okay? But we know next season exactly what needs to happen, okay? There's 2 things the Big 12 must consider. Do we decrease or take away 1 conference game so we don't cannibalize ourselves and prepare for the postseason? And we know we must produce wins. So that must be considered, because that, I see, is part of a downfall when the committee looks at the Big 12 when considering the members there. You know, they're looking at the strength of schedule. That is there. The strength of schedule is there. But the issue is the loss count. The loss count, as you can see, is 1 game too many. You produced a lot of 10 and 2 teams and 9 and 3 teams. And that's because of that extra conference game. And that is what's doing it. When you compare to SEC, they have that extra win game because they're only playing 8 conference games and they're playing 4 out of conference, and they get that extra win. So it makes them look better on paper and on the field because they have that extra win. And that is the edge that they have over the Big 12. Now, I understand far as, facilities being bigger, and I understand that they have the edge on recruiting at times, right? But at the end of the day, okay, it's all about the coaching. How are the coaches motivating their players to play? Because these members, remember, there's no mystery. There's no, this team is better than that team. It's about how they're coached, how they prepare and practice. If they're doing, this is how you know what your team are, coaches. If your team is performing well in practice, it's going to translate on the field, regardless of who you play. If your team is listening and can follow the game plan in practice and execute well, it doesn't matter who they play. It's going to translate over into the field. It doesn't matter of how many people come to the game. Yes, we understand these external factors of fans and things like that, and playing in larger facilities, but it's tunnel vision. When you get on the field, it's tunnel vision on the field, how you execute in practice and how that translate over into the game time. You can tune out all of the fan crowd and the big facilities. It's about what's going on that field. Your team has to be tunnel vision and focus on the game at hand. They can't be distracted. And that's very important. That's coaching. So that is for the coaching. You got to be able to motivate your players come game time, and they have to execute in practice. Now, there shouldn't be any complaints on who team got in. And like I said, this is really, I'm trying to think of the word that is what was happening here. You got 3 members in. Your conference champion has the first seed or the bye week. Okay, and then you got these additional members. So there shouldn't be no complaining about the format. The format works fine. Okay, now I will say it is time to go to 16. I said that a long time ago, that 16 is the right amount, the right number. It will work better, but we cannot overlook the Big 12 because they did not have any other discussion about any additional teams, and there could have easily been 2 more teams in the Big 12, period. Colorado should have been discussed if we're talking about 9-3. Which we didn't. So there's not enough slots for 9-3. Really, that's the truth. There's not enough slots for 9-3. I'm sorry, if you win at this, with this amount of slots being 12, there's no room for 9-3 teams, period. There's just not. Okay. So 10-2, how many 10-2 teams should have been? All of the 10-2 teams in the Power 4 structure should have been discussed. Okay, and it should be analyzed. Okay, these rankings is what's messing up this format. It's one of the two. Playoff committee, are we going to be going with ranking, right? Because if you notice, the NFL doesn't rank based off of the way the college football ranking. Okay, they do a power ranking from overall NFL, but they don't base their playoff selection based off of that. That's a win-loss schedule. So the rankings is really what's affecting the format. You can't have both. If we're going with a format structure based off of win and loss, which I think that's where we're going, it's going to be strictly wins and losses. And this is why it's important with the group of 5. They should never be considered in a bye. They should always have that 12 or that 16th, however many slots should be reserved for the group of 5 champion. This is what we're talking about here. The group of 5 champion, okay, that 16, when it goes to 16, or right now it's at 12, or if it go to 14, that last slot, regardless of anything, the group of 5 champion should always get that slot. You're probably going to say, well, that's not fair to them. Why they got to always be at the bottom and fight their way up to the top? Look, it's either that or they branch off into their own thing. Okay? So there couldn't be, they're thankful. Trust me, the group of 5 is thankful to be able to automatically get into the group of 5. I'm just telling you, they are happy that that's happening. So it's not like you'll be affecting them by that not happening. So they should that's for them. That should never be taken. That last slot. Okay. So that goes to the group of 5. Now, everything else should be win or loss. I don't want to hear the complaints of, oh, we had a tougher schedule or we had this. Yes, that is what happens when you take other conferences, good teams or programs that are performing well at the time. When you take their programs, you're making it harder for yourself. That's a consequence of your actions. You can't complain about that later when you don't win games. I've already said this. When you when you have bringing all these teams in, you're just not going to make it to the top. I've already said that. This is a direct consequence of greed, being greed. Now we're trying to fix the polarity with adding more teams so it can be a balanced conference, and that's what the Big 12 is doing. But you got teams like the SEC and so on. They have bad teams already in their conference, okay? They're not getting rid of those bad teams. And then they complain about, oh, every week is like this. Yes, that's because you guys wanted to do that. And that's what you did. And as a result, guess what happened? You're not going to make it to the top like you used to. That is what's